Chapter 1. From San Francisco to London. When I was 27 years old, I worked in an office in San Francisco. I did my job well and my future was promising. I was alone in the world and I was happy. On Saturday afternoons I didn't work. I sailed my little sailboat on San Francisco Bay. One Saturday afternoon, I sailed out too far. The strong afternoon wind pushed my sailboat out of the bay, into the Pacific Ocean. That night, when I had lost all hope, a small British brig saw me and took me on board. The brig was sailing to London. The voyage was long and stormy. I worked as a sailor to pay for my trip. When I arrived in London, my clothes were old and dirty. I had only $1 in my pocket. With this dollar, I ate and slept for the first 24 hours. During the next 24 hours, I didn't eat and didn't sleep. At about 10 o'clock the following morning, I went to Portland Place. I saw a child walking past, holding a big pear. The child ate one small piece, and then threw the pear onto the street. I stopped and looked at it. I was very hungry and I really wanted that pear. But every time I tried to get it, someone passed by and looked at me. I quickly turned in the other direction and waited for the person to pass by. I tried again and again to get that pear, but the same thing happened. I was desperate. I decided to get the pear, and not to worry about the people who saw me. At that moment, a gentleman opened a window behind me and said, "Come in here, please." A well-dressed servant opened the door. He took me to a beautiful room. Here, two old gentlemen were sitting and discussing something important. Their breakfast was on the table. I was very hungry and I stared at their breakfast. I want to tell the reader that the two gentlemen had made a bet several days before. I knew nothing about the bet until later. Let me tell you what happened. Chapter 2. An unusual bet. The two old gentlemen were brothers. For several days, they argued about a very strange subject. They decided to end their argument with a bet, as the English usually do. The following was the subject of the bet. The Bank of England issued 2 banknotes of $1 million each for a public transaction with a foreign country. England used one banknote, and the other remained in the bank. At this point, Brother A said to Brother B, "If an honest and intelligent stranger arrives in London without a friend and without money, except for the $1 million banknote, he will starve to death." Brother B answered, "No, I don't agree." Brother A said, "If he goes to the bank or anywhere else to change this big note, the police will put him in prison." They continued arguing for days, until Brother B said, "I'll bet $20,000 that the stranger will live for 30 days with the banknote and not go to prison." Brother A accepted the bet. He went to the bank and bought the $1 million banknote. After, he returned home and prepared a letter. Then the two brothers sat by the window and waited for the right man for the bet. They saw a lot of honest faces go by, but they were not intelligent enough. Several faces were intelligent, but they were not honest. A lot of faces were honest and intelligent, but they were not poor enough. Other faces were honest, intelligent and poor, but they were not strangers. When they saw me from the window, they thought I was the right man. They asked me questions, and soon they knew my story. Finally, they told me I was the right man for the bet. I asked them to explain the bet. One of the gentlemen gave me an envelope. I wanted to open it, but he said, "No, don't open it now. Wait until you are in your hotel room. Then read it very carefully." I was confused and I wanted to discuss the subject with them. But they didn't. I felt hurt because I was the subject of a joke. When I left their house, I looked for the pair on the street. It was gone. I was quite angry with those two gentlemen. Far from their house, I opened the envelope. I saw that there was money inside. I didn't stop to read their letter. I ran to the nearest eating place. I ate and ate and ate. At last, I took out the envelope with the money to pay for my meal. I looked at the banknote and almost fainted. It was a banknote worth $5 million. I was speechless. I stared at the banknote. The two gentlemen had made a big mistake. They probably wanted to give me a $1 banknote. I saw the owner of the eating place staring at the banknote, too. We were both surprised. I did not know what to do or say. So, I simply gave him the note and said, "Give me the change, please." The owner apologized 1,000 times. "I'm very sorry, but I can't change this banknote, sir. I don't have any other money. Please change this note." The owner then said, "You can pay for this food whenever you want, sir. I understand that you are a very rich gentleman. You like playing jokes on people by dressing like a poor man. You can come here and eat all you want, whenever you want. You can pay me when you want." Chapter 3. The letter. When I arrived, the same servant opened the door. I asked for the two gentlemen. "They are gone," the servant said. "Gone? Gone where?" "Oh, on a journey." "But where did they go?" "To the continent, I think." "The continent?" There were no signature, no address, no date on the letter. How strange. I didn't know what to think. I went to a park, sat down and thought about what to do. After an hour, I reached the decision that follows. I have no idea what kind of game the two elderly gentlemen are playing. They are placing a wager on me. However, I was ignorant of the specifics of the wager at the time. The Bank of England will question me endlessly if I go to return the banknote. I can tell you the truth, but no one will trust me. I'll be placed in an asylum by them. The police are going to put me in jail if I lie. Since nobody in their right mind would want it, I can't even give it to anyone. I can do only one thing. I must keep the bill for a whole month. And I must not lose it. If I help the old man to win his bet, he will give me the job I want. The idea of an important job with a big salary made me happy. With this exciting idea in mind, I began walking down the streets of London. Chapter 4. At the tailor's. Every time I passed in front of a tailor's, I wanted to enter and buy some new clothes. but I had no money to pay for them. The $1 million banknote in my pocket was useless. I passed in front of the same tailor 6 times. At last I entered. I quietly asked if they had an old, unattractive suit that no one wanted to buy. The man I spoke to nodded his head, but he didn't speak. Then another man looked at me and nodded his head. I went to him and he said, "1 moment, please." After some time, he took me to a back room. He looked at several ugly suits that no one wanted. He chose the worst for me. I really wanted a suit, so I said nothing. It was time to pay. "Can you wait a few days for the money? I haven't got any small change with me." The man said, "Oh, you haven't? Well, I thought gentlemen like you carried large change." "My friend," I replied, "you can't judge a stranger by the clothes he wears. I can pay for this suit. But, can you change a large banknote?" "Oh, of course we can change a large banknote," he said coldly. I gave him the banknote. He received it with a smile. A big smile that covered his face. When he read the banknote, his smile disappeared. The owner of the shop came over and asked me, "What's the trouble?" "There isn't any trouble. I'm waiting for my change." Come. Give him his change, Todd. Quickly. Todd answered, "It's easy to say, but look at the banknote." The owner looked at the banknote. Then he looked at my package with the ugly suit. "Todd," he shouted, "you are stupid. How can you sell this unattractive suit to a millionaire? Todd, you can't see the difference between a millionaire and a poor man." "I apologize, sir," the owner continued. "Please take off those things you are wearing and throw them in the fire. Put on this fine shirt and this handsome suit. It's perfect for you, simple but elegant." I told him. I was very happy with the new suit. "Oh, wait until you see what we can make for you in your size. Todd, bring a pen and a book. Let me measure your leg, your arm." I didn't have a moment to speak. The owner measured me. Then he ordered his tailors to make me morning suits, evening suits, shirts, coats, and other things. "But, my dear sir," I said, "I can order all these things only if you change my banknote. Or, if you can wait a while before I pay you." "Wait a while." "I'll wait forever, that's the word. Todd, send these things to the gentleman's address. Let the less important customers wait." "What's your address, sir?" "I'm changing my home." "I'll come back and give you my new address," I replied. "Quite right, sir, quite right. Let me show you to the door, sir." "Good day, sir, good day." Chapter 5. The Poor Millionaire. The impossible happened. I bought everything I wanted without money. I showed my banknote and asked for change, but every time the same thing happened. No one was able to change it. I bought all that I needed and all the luxuries that I wanted. I stayed at an expensive hotel in Hanover Square. I always had dinner at the hotel, but I preferred having breakfast at Harris's simple eating place. Harris's was the first place where I had a good meal with my $1 million note. That's where it all started. The news about me and my banknote was all over London. Harris's eating place became famous because I had breakfast there. Harris was happy with all his new customers. I lived like a rich, important man. I had money to spend. I lived in a dream. But often, I said to myself, remember, this dream will end when the two men return to London. Everything will change. My story was in the newspapers. Everyone talked about the strange millionaire with a $1 million note in his pocket. Punch magazine drew a funny picture of me on the front page. People talked about everything I did. And about everything I said. They followed me in the streets. Kept my old clothes, and sometimes I wore them. It was fun when the shop owners thought I was poor. Then I showed them the banknote, and, oh, how their faces changed. After 10 days in London, I went to visit the American ambassador. He was very happy to meet me. He invited me to a dinner party that evening. He told me that he knew my father from Yale University. He invited me to visit his home whenever I wanted. I was glad to have a new, important friend. I thought to myself, I'll need an important friend when the story of the $1 million note and bet comes out. I want the reader to know that I plan to pay back all the shop owners who sold me things on credit. If I win the bet for the old gentleman, I thought, I will have an important job. With an important job, I will have a big salary. I plan to pay back everyone with my first year's salary. Chapter 6. The Dinner Party. There were 14 people at the dinner party. The Duke and Duchess of Shoreditch and their daughter, Lady Anne Grace Eleanor de Bohun, the Earl and Countess of Newgate, Viscount Cheapside, Lord and Lady Blatherskite, the ambassador and his wife and daughter, and some other people. There was also a beautiful, 22-year-old English girl named Portia Langham. I fell in love with her in 2 minutes, and she with me. After a while, the house servant presented another guest, Mr. Lloyd Hastings. When Mr. Hastings saw me, he said, I think I know you. Yes, you probably do. Are you the yes, I'm the strange millionaire with the $1 million note in his pocket. Well, this is a surprise. I never thought you were the same Henry Adams from San Francisco. 6 months ago, you were working in the offices of Blake Hopkins in San Francisco. I remember clearly. You had a very small salary. And, at night, you helped me arrange the papers for the Gould and Curry Mining Company. Now you're a millionaire, a celebrity here in London. I can't believe it. How exciting. I can't believe it, either, Lloyd. Just 3 months ago, we went to the Miners' Restaurant. No, it was the What Cheer restaurant. Right, it was the What Cheer. We went there at 2 o'clock in the morning. We had steak and coffee. That night we worked for 6 long hours on the Gould and Curry Mining Company papers. Do you remember, Henry, I asked you to come to London with me. I wanted you to help me sell the Gould and Curry gold mine shares. But you refused. Of course I remember. I didn't want to leave my job in San Francisco. And I still think it's difficult to sell shares of a California gold mine here in London. You were right, Henry. You were so right. It is impossible to sell B shares here in London. My plan failed and I spent all my money. I don't want to talk about it. But you must talk about it. When we leave the dinner party, you must tell me what happened. Oh, can I? I really need to talk to a friend, Lloyd said, with water in his eyes. Yes, I want to hear the whole story, every word of it. Thank you, Henry. You're a true friend. At this point, it was time for dinner. Thanks to the English system of precedence, there was no dinner. At the head of the table was where the Duke of Shoreditch desired to sit. The ambassador from the United States also desired a seat at the head of the table. We skipped dinner because they couldn't decide. The English are aware of the precedence system. Before heading out to dinner, they eat dinner. Strangers, however, are unaware of it. They don't stop eating throughout the night. We had a strawberry and a dish of sardines instead. It was now time to play cribbage, a game for all of them. The English never engage in leisurely gaming. Either they win or they lose when they play. Miss Lanham and I played the game, but with little interest. I looked at her beautiful face and said, "Miss Lanham, I love you." "Mr. Adams." She said softly and smiled, "I love you too." This was a wonderful evening. Miss Lanham and I were very happy. We smiled, laughed and talked. I was honest with her. I told her that I was poor, and that I didn't have a cent in the world. I explained that the $1 million note was not mine. She was very curious to know more. I told her the whole story from the start. She laughed and laughed. She thought the story was very funny. I didn't understand why it was funny. I also explained that I needed an important job with a big salary to pay all my debts. "Portia, dear, can you come with me on the day I must meet those two gentlemen?" "Well, yes, if I can help you," she replied. "Of course you can help me. You are so lovely that when the two gentlemen see you, I can ask for any job and any salary. With you there, my sweet Portia, the two gentlemen won't refuse me anything." Chapter 7. A $1 Million Idea. At the end of the dinner party, I returned to the hotel with Hastings. He talked about his problems, but I didn't listen to him. I was thinking about Portia the whole time. When we arrived at the hotel, Hastings said, "Let me just stand here and look at this marvelous hotel. It's a palace. What expensive furniture. You have everything you want. You are rich, Henry. And I am poor." His words scared me. I, too, was poor. I didn't have a cent in the world, and I had debts to pay. I needed to win the gentleman's bet. This was my last hope. Hastings didn't know the truth. "Henry, just a tiny part of your income can save me. I'm desperate." Hastings cried. "My dear Hastings, sit down here and drink this hot whiskey. Now tell me your whole story, every word of it. Do you want to hear my story again? But, you never told me your story." "Of course I told you my story, as we walked to the hotel. Don't you remember?" I didn't hear one word of it. Henry, are you ill? Is something wrong with you? What did you drink at the dinner party? Oh, Hastings, I'm in love. I can only think about my sweet Portia. This is why I didn't hear your story before. Hastings got up from his chair, shook my hand and laughed. I'm very happy for you, Henry, very happy, he said smiling. I'll tell you the whole story again. So he sat down and patiently started to tell me his story. To make a long story short, the owners of the Gould and Curry gold mine sent Lloyd to England to sell the shares of the mine for $1 million. Any money he received over $1 million was his to keep. Hastings's dream was to sell the shares for more than $1 million and become rich. He had only 1 month to sell the shares. He had done everything to sell them, but nobody wanted to buy them. Then he jumped up and cried, Henry, you can help me. Will you do it? Tell me how. Give me $1 million and I'll sell you all the shares. You will be the new owner of the gold mine. Don't refuse. I did not know what to say. I wanted to tell Hastings the truth. But then, an intelligent idea came to me. I thought about it for a moment and then calmly said, I will save you, Lloyd. Then I am already saved. How can I thank you? Let me finish, Lloyd. I will save you, but not in that way. I have a better way. I know everything about that mine. I know its great value. You will sell the shares by using my name. You can send anyone to me, since people in London know me. I will guarantee the gold mine. In a week or two, you will sell the shares for $3 million by using my name. And we'll share the money you earn. Half to you and half to me. Lloyd was very happy and excited. He danced around the room and laughed. I can use your name. Your name, think of it. The rich Londoners will run to buy these shares. I'm saved. And I'll never forget you, Henry. Chapter 8. Back to Portland Place. The next day, all of London talked about the shares of the California gold mine. I stayed in my hotel and said to everyone who came to me, yes, I know Mr. Hastings. He's a very honest man. And I know the gold mine, because I lived in the California gold country. It is a mine of great value. People were now interested in buying the shares. I spent every evening with Portia at the American ambassador's house. I didn't tell her about the shares and the mine. It was a surprise. We talked about our love and our future together. Finally, the end of the month arrived. Lots of rich Londoners bought the shares of the mine. I had $1 million of my own in the London and County Bank. And Lloyd did too. It was time to meet with the two old gentlemen. I dressed in my best clothes, and I went to get Portia. Before going to Portland Place, Portia and I talked about the job and the salary. Portia, you are so beautiful. When the two gentlemen meet you, they will give me any job and any salary I ask for. Henry, please remember that if we ask for too much, we will get nothing. Then what will happen to us? Don't be afraid, Portia. When we arrived, the same servant opened the door. There were the two old gentlemen having tea. They were surprised to see Portia. I introduced her to them. They looked at her with curiosity. Then I said, "Gentlemen, I am ready to report to you." The room fell silent. One gentleman stepped forward. "We are pleased to hear this," he said. The others nodded. "Now we can decide the bet that my brother Abel and I made." I glanced at her. She nodded. I took a deep breath and began to explain. The gentleman listened intently. When I finished, there was a long silence. The first gentleman spoke again. "Thank you for your thorough report," he said. He turned to Abel. "It seems we have our answer." The bet was decided. I felt a sense of relief. The gentleman smiled at me. "You have done well," he said. "Thank you," I replied. We said our goodbyes and left the room. Outside, the sun was setting. She turned to me. "You did a great job," she said. "Thank you," I replied. "I couldn't have done it without you. We make a good team," she said. I nodded. We walked on, ready for whatever the future held. "If you won for me, you can have any job in my power," he said. His eyes were serious. "Do you have the $1 million note?" he asked. "Here it is, sir," I replied, and I handed it to him. He looked at the note, then looked back at me. "I won," he shouted with joy. His voice echoed in the room. Now he turned to Abel. "Now what do you say, Abel?" he asked. Abel looked defeated. "I say he survived, and I lost $20,000, he admitted. "I can't believe it." The room was filled with surprise and disbelief. Abel shook his head, still processing the loss. I took a deep breath. "I have more to tell you," I said. They all turned to me, curious. "But it's a long story," I continued. "I'll tell you another time." They looked disappointed but intrigued. "For now," I said, reaching into my bag, "look at this." I pulled out a small, mysterious object. Their eyes widened with interest. The room was silent, filled with anticipation. The gentleman who had won the bet leaned in closer. "What is it?" he asked. I smiled. "That's a story for another day," I said. "But trust me, it's worth the wait." They nodded, understanding that some secrets need time. We left the room with a sense of excitement for the future. "What?" "A certificate of deposit for $200,000. "Is it yours?" he exclaimed, holding the paper. "It's mine," I replied calmly. "I earned it by using the banknote you lent me for a month." "Unbelievable!" He stared at me in disbelief. Portia stepped forward, her eyes wide. "Henry, is that really yours?" she asked. Her surprise was clear. "You never mentioned this." Feeling guilty, I nodded. "No, I didn't. But I trust you'll forgive me." Portia's response was sharp. "Don't count on it, Henry. You lied." I sighed, trying to ease the tension. "It was just a bit of fun." Let's move on. But Portia shook her head. Wait, there's more, my companion interjected, stopping me. Everyone turned to listen. I felt a mix of nerves and anticipation. Go on, I said to my companion. He took a deep breath. Using that banknote opened many doors, he explained. We got opportunities we never imagined. Portia looked skeptical. Like what? She asked. Well, my companion continued, we invested in a small business. It grew fast. That's how we earned the $200,000. Portia's eyes softened a bit. Really? That's impressive. I nodded. Yes, and there's more. We also made connections with influential people. It changed everything for us. Portia's expression shifted from anger to curiosity. Why didn't you tell me sooner? She asked. I didn't want to worry you, I admitted. But now you know everything. Portia took a deep breath. I need time to process this, she said. Take all the time you need, I replied. I just wanted to be honest with you now. Portia nodded. Thank you, Henry. I appreciate that. We stood in silence for a moment, the tension easing. Finally, she smiled. Let's see where this takes us, she said. I smiled back, relieved. Yes, let's. We left the room, the air feeling lighter. The future was uncertain. But we were ready to face it together. I offer you a job and any salary you desire, he said with a smile. Grateful, yet hesitant, I declined the offer. Thank you, but I must refuse. Portia, however, felt differently. You didn't thank him properly, she scolded me. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Allow me, she said, stepping forward. She approached the gentleman, perched on his lap, and planted a kiss on his cheek. Their laughter filled the room, leaving me bewildered. Is he your father? I inquired, trying to understand their familiarity. Portia clarified with a grin, stepfather, but dear nonetheless. Suddenly, the pieces clicked, and I understood Portia's earlier amusement. The way they interacted made sense now. I retract my previous statement, I said, feeling a bit embarrassed. Thank you, sir, for the generous offer. Portia's stepfather laughed. No harm done, he said. Family can surprise us sometimes. Portia looked at me, her eyes twinkling. I hope you understand now, she said softly. I do, I replied. And I appreciate everything. Portia's stepfather stood up, still smiling. Well, if you ever change your mind, the offer stands. I'll keep that in mind, I said. Thank you again. We left the room, the atmosphere lighter than before. Outside, the evening air was cool and refreshing. Portia took my arm, and we walked in silence for a while. Finally, she spoke. You did well back there. Thank you, I replied. I was just caught off guard. Portia laughed. I know. But now you see why I love my stepfather so much. I do, I said. He's quite the character. We continued walking, the events of the evening still fresh in our minds. It had been an unexpected but enlightening experience. As we walked, I felt a sense of contentment. Despite the surprises, everything had turned out well. I looked at Portia, and she smiled at me. "Ready for whatever comes next?" she asked. "Absolutely," I replied. "Let's see where this journey takes us." And with that, we continued on, ready to face the future together. I addressed her stepfather. "There is indeed a job I desire." He raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What might that be?" he queried. "The position of son-in-law," I declared boldly. The room fell silent for a moment. Then, laughter erupted from her stepfather. "Well, that's quite a request," he said, his eyes twinkling. Portia blushed but smiled. "You always know how to surprise us," she said softly. Her stepfather leaned back in his chair, considering my words. "You've got guts, I'll give you that," he said. "But are you serious?" "Absolutely," I replied, meeting his gaze. "I love Portia, and I want to spend my life with her." Portia's stepfather looked at her. "And what do you think, my dear?" he asked. Portia stepped closer to me. "I think he's perfect," she said, taking my hand. Her stepfather nodded slowly. "Well, I can't argue with that," he said with a smile. "But let's see how you handle a bit of playful banter first." He stood up and walked over to us. "So, you think you can handle being part of this family?" he asked, a teasing glint in his eye. "I do," I said confidently. "Good," he replied. "Because we're a lively bunch. There's never a dull moment." Portia laughed. "He's right about that." We spent the next hour engaged in light-hearted conversation and jokes. Her stepfather shared stories about their family, each one more amusing than the last. It was clear that they were a close-knit and loving group. Eventually, the conversation turned serious again. Her stepfather looked at me thoughtfully. "You've proven you're serious," he said. "And you've got the spirit to keep up with us. I give you my blessing." I felt a wave of relief and joy. "Thank you, sir," I said earnestly. Portia's eyes sparkled with happiness. "This is the best day ever," she said, hugging me tightly. Her stepfather chuckled. "Welcome to the family," he said, patting me on the back. We spent the rest of the evening celebrating. The room was filled with laughter and love. It was a perfect night. And I couldn't have asked for a better outcome. As the evening wound down, Portia and I stepped outside for some fresh air. The stars were bright in the sky, and the night was peaceful. "Can you believe it?" she asked, looking up at the stars. "I can," I replied. "It's everything I ever wanted." She smiled at me. "I'm so happy," she said. "We're going to have an amazing life together." "I know we will," I said, pulling her close. "This is just the beginning." We stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, ready for whatever the future held. The journey ahead was full of promise and excitement. And we were ready to face it together. I was granted the role. Portia and I embarked on a lifetime of happiness together. Our love story became the talk of London. Everyone was fascinated by how it all began. especially after Portia's father cashed the mysterious banknote. He gifted it to us as a wedding memento. It was an extraordinary gesture. We framed the banknote and hung it proudly in our new home. Every time we looked at it, we were reminded of our incredible journey. That banknote, worth millions, could only purchase one thing of true value: the love of Portia. Our wedding was a grand affair. Friends and family gathered from far and wide. The joy and love in the air were palpable. We danced the night away, surrounded by those we cherished. After the wedding, we settled into our new life. Our home was warm and inviting. We filled it with memories and laughter. Each day brought new adventures and happiness. Portia and I explored London together. We visited museums, attended theatre performances, and enjoyed long walks in the parks. Our love grew stronger with each passing day. Our story became a favorite among our friends. They loved hearing how a simple banknote led to a grand romance. It was a tale of serendipity and destiny. As years passed, we built a beautiful life. We faced challenges, but our love always saw us through. The framed banknote remained a symbol of our bond, reminding us of how it all started. We often reminisced about the day Portia's father gave us the banknote. It was a moment that changed our lives forever. His blessing and support meant the world to us. Portia's father continued to be a part of our lives. He visited often, sharing in our joys and offering wisdom. His presence was a constant source of strength and comfort. Looking back, it was clear that everything happened for a reason. The mysterious banknote, the job offer, and the bold declaration of love all led us to this perfect life. Portia and I grew old together, our love never fading. We cherished every moment, grateful for the journey we had shared. Our story was one of true love and enduring happiness. In the end, it wasn't the banknote's monetary value that mattered. It was the love it symbolized, the bond it represented. The love of Portia was priceless, and I was the luckiest man in the world. As we sat by the fire in our cozy home, I looked at Portia and smiled. "We have had an incredible journey," I said. She nodded, her eyes filled with love. "And it's not over yet," she replied. I took her hand and squeezed it gently. "No, it's not," I agreed. "We have a lifetime of happiness ahead." And with that, we continued our journey together, ready for whatever the future held. The love of Portia was my greatest treasure, and I would cherish it forever. The end.